What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Swanky Disc Golf. Today, we are going to be looking at 5 great alternatives to the Innova Wraith. The Innova Wraith is one of the absolute best discs on the planet, but it is not for everyone. It is one of the most popular 11-speed, kind of overstable drivers, and if you're trying to fill that slot in the bag and you don't like the Wraith, you can kind of feel a little bit lost because everyone says the Wraith, including myself, is one of the best discs on the planet. So we're going to talk about it. We've got 5 discs that are great alternatives. They fly either a little bit different or they have a little bit of a different hand feel, and we're excited to get into it. Make sure you guys let us know what you think in the comments below of this list. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for new videos like this every single week, and we're going to jump into it. My name is Luke. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Reed and Josiah, and we're doing things a little bit differently. Some of you guys might have noticed, especially for our audio-only listeners, we've kind of experimented with combining our podcast and our main channel uploads. It's just something we've been getting a lot of good feedback from the podcast, and people seem to really like listening to the podcasts that are more like our main channel videos. So we're experimenting with this. You can let us know in the comments if you are okay with this sort of long-form switch-up. We love talking about discs with you guys. We love getting your feedback and reactions in the comments. So we're trying this out. Let us know what you think. Before I continue, I also want to say big shout-out to Disc Golf Deals USA. You can get 10% off if you use our link. All of the discs on this list you can find on Disc Golf Deals USA. They're an awesome retailer. And also, we've been getting a lot of questions about Squatch bags lately. We posted a few videos talking about disc golf bags, and people have been going crazy asking us about Squatch, and we actually have a code for Squatch that we've had for a long time. We don't always advertise it. We do in some of our Squatch videos, but I wanted to shout out free shipping for SquatchDiscGolf.com if you use code Swanky. If you want a Squatch disc golf bag, you can get free shipping with code Swanky. Wanted to shout that out really quick, and now, without further ado, let's jump into the list. Are Josiah and Reed ready? Are you guys ready?
Heck yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So I have a list. We've kind of curated it, and we're going to talk about it. This list is, some of us are really big fans of the discs, and others are not. So it's going to be interesting, and I'm super curious to see what the viewers think. But number 5, we're going to start with the DD1 from Discmania. This is kind of a re-release out of Discmania. They had a DD1 quite some time ago. They switched over manufacturers, as most people know, and now we have the DD1 coming in at the flight numbers. It's re-released 11.5, -1, 2. So a little bit different than the Wraith. We know the Wraith is 11.5, -1, 3, and I think a lot of amateurs hear people say, oh, the Wraith is like a destroyer for amateurs, and you pick it up as your first distance driver, and it's really not doing it for you. It's way more overstable than you thought. Try taking it a tick down to 11.5, -1, 2. What do you guys think about the DD1? Reed, what's your opinion?
Yeah, the DD1's a great mold. I remember first throwing these in the Horizon molds, I believe, is how they first were released. But
Yes, the Stratosphere.
Yeah, the Stratosphere. That's right. I remember thinking it was called the Stratosphere for so long, or maybe I thought it was called Horizon. I don't know. There was some confusion over the name.
No,
but
Horizon Plastic, the Stratosphere,
yes,
is what they
that's
called
what
it
they called
originally.
That's right. Yeah, but the DD1, like right out of the gate, it was really good. I remember it feeling pretty overstable out of the gate, especially in that Horizon plastic, and then getting it later in the S-Line plastic and definitely feeling like, okay, this is definitely more of what I thought based on the flight numbers, that 11.5, -1, 2 type of flight. So maybe that's just my experience with it. I don't even know if the Horizon is still available, but the S-Line was
That's a good question.
fantastic, and definitely flies as advertised, especially after a few throws with it. Yeah, I am a really big fan of Discmania's S-Line plastic, so I will always prefer to throw their drivers, especially in that plastic. Big fan.
Yeah, what do you think, Josiah?
So in my bag currently is a Horizon Stratosphere DD1.
There it is.
So big fan of the
Big
DD1.
fan.
I also I have a slightly more stable driver, and then I bagged the Discmania DD. as like my understable one, and the DD is in the S-line plastic. So the Horizon is a good complement to just kind of get me a little bit more stability. So do with that what you will, knowing that I play at significant elevation. So it's probably still flying a little bit more stable than you might typically do. But I love the DD1 as kind of a complement to a flippy driver, and then a more overstable driver as well. So big fan of this as a complement to the Wraith, especially because I went through a whole phase in disc golf where in the beginning it's like everybody says start with mids and putters and then move your way up, and then I got to 7 and I was like, all right, I'm good for, you know, destroyers and enigmas and 12 and 13 speeds. My fastest disc in my bag is an 11 speed now. Which if you had asked me that, you know, 3 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. I thought I would have moved on to the 15 speeds by now, but
that's everyone's goal.
That is the goal, but yeah,
please don't do that.
It's the more I play, the more I realize I'm like, I don't need anything over a 10 or 11 speed. So 11 is my cap for anything in my bag, and that wasn't intentional. It was just I started throwing discs because I liked how it flew and I liked how it felt, and then it just ended up that all the distance drivers in my bag ended up being 11 speed. So really good compliment to those who feel the urge to rush to those 12 or 13 speeds and find something that's stable. You can just cut back to an 11 speed. And clearly this is a good compliment for the Wraith. I do think it's a little bit flippier, like slightly flippier, obviously, as the numbers indicate, but even right out of the box, me throwing this, I was like big fan.
Yeah. For sure, 100%. That's a good point. I think a lot of people end up later in their disc golf careers realizing that they stop at 10 or 11 speeds or even lower than that, and that's just wisdom. But also, this list is not going to be completely one-to-one Wraith copies. Is not exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at things that are similar slot in the bag for different players, and the DD1 is definitely going to fill that. I think it is a little bit more flippy. The Stratosphere with the Horizon plastic might be a little bit more similar to like a traditional Wraith, and the S-line is going to be a little bit more understable. But we love the DD1. We love Discmania. We love their marketing. They just do a good job at connecting with the consumer and putting out really cool products. Right now they have a Discmania challenge, like fundraiser DD1 out. They're super cool looking, swirly S-line. Discmania does really cool things, and that's one of the reasons why this is going to be on the list, because to some degree these discs are going to have very similar flights, and the difference between a Wraith and a DD1 for somebody who's only throwing 300 feet is going to be so marginal. Sometimes it's a difference that you feel really matters, sometimes it's not. But there's going to be a lot that goes into these discs. One thing with the DD1 is the cool different plastics that it comes in, the cool Discmania marketing. Who knows when you're going to get an awesome run of the DD1. And their consistency is awesome. They've moved into House of Discs now, and much to like Latitude 64, even Dynamic Discs, we're really loving the plastic and consistency personally that we see out of them, and we're seeing that now in Discmania. Really, really sick disc coming in at number 5. Now we're going to move on to number 4. Number 4 is one I personally don't have a lot of experience with. I think these other guys might, though. We're going with the Photon from MVP. That is right. The MVP Photon. You know I don't have a lot of experience with it because I really don't have, I say this all the time, I really don't bag many overmolded drivers. I don't love it. Not a fan, but there are some that are great. I love the Wave. I think the Photon's really popular, and it's a great comp here. Reed, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about the Photon?
Yeah, the Photon. I think the Photon is going to be one you did a great job just now kind of going over why we're even doing a list like this, because, you know, people are looking for an alternative to the Wraith for different reasons. Some people might not like the Wraith, and then some people might just like be looking for something that's a little bit more their style, whether that's design or brand alignment. Like there's a lot of different reasons. If you don't like the flight or hand feel of the Wraith, either of them, the Photon is a good way to go because this is going to be the most different hand feel,
Dramatically different
hand feel, and that has more to do with the gyro technology than anything for sure. The overmolded rim, but also I think it has a very different shoulder shape than the Wraith does. So it feels very different, and it's gonna fly a little bit more overstable as well. So maybe if you're newer and you're throwing, I don't know, like a lot of people like to throw Anheuser forehands when they're starting. This disc might fly a little bit better for you. In that slot, it's just going to be more overstable. If you throw a lot of backhands and you've got a stronger arm, maybe the Wraith's turning over for you, you're definitely a more advanced player at that point. The Photon, it is more overstable than its numbers suggest, and I know Josiah will back me up there. It is definitely ticking the other way than the DD1.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a great alternative as well. And like we said, for the many reasons you could want to stray away from the Wraith, the Photon meets a whole different set of needs, but kind of in the same slot, which is why it's on this list.
Yeah, no.
You have any experience with the Photon,
A
Josiah?
little, not out here.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so not out here. I don't have a lot of experience, but I do personally love the hand feel of overmolded MVP discs, so that has never been a problem for me. But yeah, definitely a little bit more overstable, and a good thing Reed just pointed out, just to tack on to him tacking on to Luke, is when you're looking for an alternative, I feel, especially when it comes to, and maybe this is just a personal opinion, when it comes to Innova discs, sometimes there's a lack of consistency with some of their most popular molds. So we've talked a lot about how like destroyers for people can mean two completely different things based on how beat up and what plastic and what weight it is. For example, there's a guy I play tags with every week who throws a Wraith religiously, but it's a lightweight Wraith, so it's super flippy, even for him. Now, granted, he can still throw that farther than I can throw anything, so I'm not out here, knocking lightweight discs or anything like that. But for those who are like, hey, I want a Wraith, and then they go buy a second one, and it's different, and they're like, what the heck? And then they buy a third one. This is where MVP steps up, and especially Discmania as well. They step up with the consistency of their molds. And for the most part, especially when it comes to plastics, that the Horizon DD1s or the Photon, if you get it in Neutron, or I think I've thrown a Glow. I feel like I threw a Glow Photon. And maybe that's why I felt like it was crazy overstable, is because MVP's Glow plastic is known for being more stable than their Neutron or Proton plastics. And so I think the kind of idea of finding consistency in a mold is super helpful. And I think this is where knowing that MVP is super consistent makes it a really good alternative.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate. We say all the time every company has inconsistencies, and people will really harp on that. Like, it's not just Innova. All companies have inconsistencies. Some companies definitely have more inconsistencies than others. Definitely 100%. And it's partially just Innova's scale. Innova's on a massive scale right now. They have like Walmart deals, this, that, the other thing. And it is definitely difficult. I know people like that too, who have a Destroyer or a Wraith, and they go to replace it, and they're like, this is not the disc I was looking for at all. I thought it was a super understable disc, or I thought it was my biggest bomber disc that I had. And then they look to something else, like a DD from Discmania, like something that's dramatically understable as a DD or something like that.
Yeah.
MVP is pretty consistent, I feel like, across the board. I don't throw a ton of their drivers. So it's hard to say, but from most of the discs I've thrown where I've lost one, like an Envy or a Proxy or something like that, if I pick it up in the same plastic, it's almost always the exact same disc. It's incredible. That's my personal experience anyways. So there you have it. There was one run of the Envy, the one MVP run that was super inconsistent and terrible. Doesn't need to be named, but we'll throw that out there. It looks cool. All right, we'll move on to number 3. Our number 3 favorite disc. This is, again, it's kind of a personal list. We just curated it. These are some of our favorites. And we all have kind of different opinions about them, but we're putting them out there to you guys to do what you will with. Comment down below what your favorite 11 speed is. We love when people join the discussion. We have people in the comments all the time discovering new discs or letting us even know discs that we've never heard of, and we get to try them out and review them, and it's an awesome time. These are some of our favorites. Number 3 is going to be the Drive from Discraft. Some people might be saying this disc is nothing like a Wraith. Some people might be saying, how could you possibly have this so low on the list? The Drive I feel like has a lot of different opinions. If you're a Discraft fan, of course, I think you love the Drive. I think it has overshadowed the previous 11 speeds that were similar. You have like the Surge SS, I think, is also an 11 speed. The Drive is technically different numbers. It's 11.5, -1, 2, instead of the Wraith 11.5, -1, 3. But it feels, to me, more similar to a Wraith than something like the Surge or some of their other 11 speeds. They have the Scorch now, which is much more understable. I think the Drive will come in a little bit more understable than the Wraith. You sort of are looking at that ESP plastic is going to be the biggest difference and a slightly more understable flight. So if you're looking for something that's just like a tiny tick away from the Wraith, I would look at the Drive. Josiah, do you have much experience with the Drive? How do you feel about the Drive?
I don't. I don't know if I've ever thrown a Drive.
There you go.
To be completely honest,
Wow.
I've heard. I know, shocking. I've heard it compared to, the Wraith and probably another disc that may or may not end up also on this list, but. I have not actually thrown the Drive, so I don't feel like I could speak much to that one.
That's all right. What do you got for us, Reed?
Yeah, the Drive is it's a good comp. It kind of operates in the same place as the DD as far as flight. The DD1 as far as flight. It's probably a little flippier even than that, but I feel like hand feel wise, this is very similar to a Wraith. My experience with the ESP Drive was the test flight ones, so I think the only ones I've held are the test flight, and then there was another Drive that we tested. I think it was the prototype. So we had the prototypes and the test flights. The test flight on the ESP was very firm, and so if you're looking for, I think that in terms of hand feel, there's a bigger difference in Discraft between ESP and Z than there is for a Wraith between Champ and Star. So if you really like a firm driver, the ESP Drive is a really cool option for you, and if you prefer it to be a little softer, the Z Drive is a really good option for you. So that's another way in which hand feel can come into play for you when you're looking for an alternative. But the Drive, to me, is the flight for someone that the Wraith is too overstable for them and they need a takedown. The Drive, I think it's probably the most understable disc on this list. And again, they're all kind of right in that same spot. But to me, I would say the Drive is probably, if not the most understable, definitely like right there on that end of the spectrum. So I think, if the Wraith is a little bit too much for you, the Drive is a great and very readily available disc, and Discraft's really cool plastics. Absolutely, like there's the ESP, the Z, the Tour Series Z. There's gonna be probably some sort of sparkle variant, which is always really cool, and probably a little bit firmer than the Z, somewhere in between. So lots of options for you if you want to go try the Drive.
Yeah, I think there are going to be more. Honestly, I'm trying to think. There's going to be, I think, more understable discs on this list, but I would call the Drive. I haven't thrown the Photon, but right up there with the DD1.
Yeah.
I guess you did kind of say that. It's more understable for sure, but I don't think as dramatically understable as someone might think. Again, it's going to be really marginal depending on what your arm speed is. Some people will really notice a difference. I really like the Drive. I remember throwing it side to side. I think we have a video out there where we throw it exactly side to side with a Wraith. And they were pretty darn similar. It really just depends on the Wraith, which is crazy. That's just how it is. A lot of people have a Star Wraith, and it's kind of understable, flies exactly like a drive. Yes, I feel like the drive is going to be just slightly different than the Wraith. If there's just something slightly off for you and you want it to be a little bit more understable, the drive is a great pickup. Not a huge difference, even if you go on I have the PDGA approved lists of discs up, and it gives you their exact specifications. The biggest difference in these two discs is going to be the height. The height on the Wraith is coming in at 1.4 centimeters. The height on the drive is coming in at 1.7 centimeters. That is the biggest difference, 0.4 centimeters, which is probably a lot when you're designing a disc. But everything else is only off by like a fraction of 0.1 centimeter. Very, very similar discs, but different plastic, different hand feel, different strokes for different folks. Love the drive. And that's also, they're all great discs. I'm here to tell you the Wraith's an incredible disc. Again, this is a video for people who just, for some reason or another, pick up the Wraith and it's not for you. That inexplicable quality, maybe there is some way to quantify it, but we don't have a way to quantify it, and it happens to every disc golfer. That's why we get comments all the time of people saying, well, I hate the Wraith. It's the worst disc I've ever thrown in my life. And then you have somebody else say, it's the best disc I've ever thrown in my entire life, so I don't know what you're talking about. Pick up the drive if the Wraith is the worst disc you've ever thrown in your life and try it out. We're going to move on to number 2. This is an interesting one because I feel like it covers multiple molds.
Definitely.
Could be wrong. We're going to pick the original mold, that being the Streamline Trace, coming in at 11.5, -1.2. Also, we're in the -1.2 range. And the reason being is I think companies are coming out with these discs, and whether it's true or not, maybe it's -1.3 anyways. I feel like this is a conspiracy theory, but I feel like marketing towards amateurs is going to sell more discs, and the more beginner disc that you have, the more of it you're going to sell. That's why the Innova Starter Set discs are some of the most sold discs of all time. It's sort of in business. It's a funnel. You have your beginners up here. There's a massive amount of beginners, and then it slowly gets tighter and tighter as you go to like where your people who are really into disc golf, really good advanced pros. There's not that many of them, and most of them aren't buying discs. So 11.5 -1.2 is going to be our kind of favorite similar flight number to the Wraith. It's going to be a little bit less overstable, and that's definitely true with the Trace. I would say true to the flight numbers, you're going to get a little flip up out of it if you're throwing around that 350 feet mark. You can get a little flip up out of it, maybe a little turn, but fade at the end consistently. And the reason why this is an interesting one is because there's several other discs that MVP Axiom Streamline outsources their plastic to. And this is just common in all businesses, but disc golf specifically. MVP produces the Longhorn from Mint Discs. They also produce the ThoughtSpace Animus, and they're very similar flight numbers, very similar specs, but they do come in a tiny bit differently. I think the most different one is going to be the Longhorn. So the numbers for the Trace are 11.5, -1.2. The numbers for the Longhorn, 11.4, -1, 2.5. That's like a lot different, I feel like. Chopping down the glide and ticking up the fade, they're saying that the Longhorn is a lot more overstable, or at least if you're throwing it at the exact same speed, exact same angle, it's going to be a lot different than the Trace. That is really hard for me to believe, but maybe it's true. I would have put the Longhorn on this list because I like it a lot, and I threw it in my bag. I'll say that every time we talk about the Longhorn. I really love the Longhorn and the Animus. ThoughtSpace, if you're thinking about picking up any of these, there's sort of different thoughts. If you are an MVP Axiom fan, Streamline is so underrated. Definitely pick up a Trace. If you are not sure, the Longhorn from Mint Discs, you're going to discover a whole underrated section of the disc golf market you've never experienced before. Longhorn, Mint Discs, incredible. If you're into branding, cool marketing, really intentional design on the artwork of the discs, the production of the discs, ThoughtSpace is going to be your go-to. They do such cool runs of discs, and they put so much work into the art that they put on the disc. They take it more seriously, I think, than any other company out there. That's your thing. Potentially all the same discs, but they're giving them pretty dramatically different flight numbers. Reed, what do you think about the Trace and the Longhorn and the Animus. Coming in at number 2 on the list because they're incredible, all of them.
Yeah, they are great. Dang, Luke just actually casually dropping some immense ball knowledge about disc marketing, and also at the same time accusing numbers of being a marketing scheme, which I think deserves its own podcast later. But I completely agree with you because it is just true that sometimes numbers don't make sense and sometimes they don't match the flight. And are companies doing their best to match them? We don't know, but 11.5 -1.2 is going to get the job done for a beginner looking to throw a little bit of a faster disc. So I'm completely with you, especially when my trace, I swear my trace is a little more overstable than my Longhorn. So I just feel like if that's true, then they've got to be all the same disc, basically, because there's no way. There's no way that should be happening.
Literally, yeah.
But I really do like these discs. I've been throwing a trace. It's not in the bag, but it's in my practice bag, so I throw it a lot when I'm just going out to a field. It's like the 4th or 5th driver down in the reps, so it gets reps. Don't worry, guys. We still do field work sometimes. The trace is super good. And then more recently, we got Longhorns in via a tournament, so I had the opportunity to throw those. And I echo Luke's opinion. The Longhorn is super fun. So if they're all the same mold, I mean, yeah, I would personally also put the Longhorn on the list because I'm in love with Mint's lineup. I'm in love with the Jackalope and everything they're doing there, like the Alpha. Like, I love all of Mint's molds. So fantastic lineup of discs that you could get exposed to if you go with the Longhorn. And that's another reason maybe you are looking at a change. Maybe the Wraith is too big box store for you. It's too Walmart, and we need to go find a Mint or an Animus to put in the bag. And that's a legitimate reason that someone might not want to bag Innova. So go for it. I love the Longhorn. I think, like we said with the drive, I wanted to go back and touch on the drive because Luke made a good point. It's not like it's an understable disc. When I say it's more understable, I was comparing it to the Wraith, and I don't want anyone to come away from this video thinking the drive is an understable disc, or any disc on this list is understable. They are not.
No, these are all going to be at least slightly overstable.
Yes, every disc on this list is slightly overstable, so I wanted to amend that and also apply it to these.
That's a good point.
It's maybe a little flippier than a Wraith out of the box, but certainly still a disc that has reliable, consistent fade at the end of its flight. And all we're really talking about is a little bit extra flip up or a little bit extra turn in the flight of the disc.
Yeah, absolutely. Josiah, have you thrown the Trace or the Longhorn or
I have thrown a Longhorn, I think once or twice from one of the tournaments we did last year when we had those discs. The Trace, actually, I have a weirdly specific memory of throwing a Trace in Florida. Playing disc golf back when we did like spring break and we met up with Southam.
Yes,
that
was a great trip.
And I threw the Trace into the water.
We don't go get those in Florida.
So,
they're gone.
So I don't think I've had much experience since I would say I know how to throw a disc now. At the time, I wouldn't consider myself an expert or even an amateur in the throwing of discs, so I can't say much about my experience. But I will say it is nice that I know we've touched a lot on like how these are like alternatives and things, and at the beginning I mentioned that I have a DD1 in my bag right now. And for almost every disc in my bag, with the exception of one, a lot of them I have backups for. But the backups are never the same mold. They're always a different mold. Like I don't have, like with the two exceptions. I have a backup for my Grackle and I have a backup for my Reactor. Those are the only two discs I have a backup for. Everything else, if I lose it, it's another mold that goes into that. And sometimes that's how people are, especially like I love discs and I love trying new things. And what happens is I go, oh, this flies exactly like, another disc I have. I don't need both of them in the bag. So I pick the one that I like better or feels better, and then the other one just ends up on a shelf in case I lose it, and then it's an easy replacement. And so this is super cool to see, like I haven't thrown, the drive, and I haven't thrown the trace in 4.5 years, but if I lose my DD1, I can think of 2 alternatives right now that I could probably go grab.
There you go.
And the Wraith, I could look at a Wraith if I wanted to. I don't, but I could go grab and so that's super cool to to know what the alternatives are for a disc that you do really like, because maybe it's not as easy to get your hands on said disc.
Yeah. No, those are great points. I do something similar. Pretty often when I lose a disc, like it's gone, I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm a little bit bummed, but I'm also like, this is a shot to throw a brand new disc. I might.
It's a little exciting.
It's a little exciting. Yeah, it's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go tell my wife I need a new disc. It's an awesome. I do it with putters all the time. I don't even lose the putters. I'm just like, I just want to. That putter looks cool. I want to try it. It's horrible for your game. Don't do that. I switch putters not to improve in disc golf, but probably every year or two I switch putters just because I'm like, this putter that just came out looks really cool and I want to try it. And my disc golf games, I'm not good enough to actually tell the difference when I'm trying out a new putter. So absolutely great. I totally stand by that. And the 11-speed slot is one specifically that you're going to have an understable Wraith, and if you try and go and replace it, it's not going to be it's not going to be understable unless you find like a lightweight or something very specific. A lot of people have really beat-in Wraiths, or they found an old one, or they had like a DX Wraith, and it's really hard to find a replacement for that. So in that case, if somebody were to tell me, if my one friend who I mentioned in our last video, who had a really understable destroyer, was like, oh man, I lost my destroyer, I need to go get a replacement, I would tell him, like, you should probably pick up maybe a Hades or something like that, because it's not going to fly. If you go and buy a destroyer, it's not going to be the same thing. So that's a great point. And it brings us to our number 1 disc. Before we tell you what number 1 is, again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for new videos every single week. We're trying to hit 40,000 subscribers. We're getting there, and when we do, we're going to do a big giveaway at 40,000, so be sure to subscribe and like the video if you're enjoying the content, and of course, like I've said too many times probably on this, let us know what you think. We love reading you guys' comments and finding out new discs, or finding out what discs you guys agreed with or disagreed with. Drop a comment below. And number 1, you haven't heard it on the list yet, so you probably know it's coming, some of you. And it is really different than the Wraith. I would say, I think when it first came out, I should tell you what it is first. It's the Grace, the Latitude 64 Grace. When it first came out, many people were running to it and saying, it's like a beat-in Wraith right out of the box. And that's kind of been its shtick. And I say again, I think a lot of companies don't want to come out with an 11.5 -1.3 disc, because then you're competing with the Wraith, and you're cutting out a whole slew of people in your market who need an 11 speed, who think that the Wraith is too overstable. The Grace 11.6 6 glide, -1.2. Notice it's also the only disc with 6 glide on this list. Latitude 64 famously giving a lot of their discs 6-7 glide. A lot of them have 7 glide. And sometimes that feels really real. Like maybe they do really put in the effort in the designs of their disc to give it an edge over the competition in glide. The Grace, it could be true. It could be the glidiest disc on this list. It feels like an absolute bomber. If you're throwing, say, like just under 400 feet pretty consistently, the Grace is going to absolutely rip for you. It is such a good disc, coming in with the best plastic in the world, the Royal Grand plastic. They put out cool releases of it all the time. It checks all the boxes that we looked for with this list. We love the Grace. Pretty much everyone who's thrown it loves the Grace. And if the Wraith is too overstable for you, your first choice, I think, should be the Grace. Would you guys agree, Reed?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Grace is just... it's a dream. It's honestly both an alternative and a complementary disc. You could bag both.
Complement.
Because if you get the right Wraith, like I think the Wraith that flies like it's supposed to, the a little more overstable Wraith, the Grace is a really great comp to throw next to it because it is more understable and it feels pretty similar to me in my hand, but it flies that much different. Like you're saying, that it's got a whole different flight down the fairway. So you could bag both. If the Wraith is too much for you, the Grace is a great disc to choose instead. And if you just like supporting Kristen Tatar, or you really like wolves, or
They're the coolest.
or if you really care about plastic, because we've been waiting this whole video to talk about the Royal Grand plastic from Latitude, but it is some of the best that exists in the market. So for sure, it has that going for it. It's like a hand feel bonus, a reliability of the plastic bonus, maintaining its flight characteristics over time. Like it's the best.
Josiah,
I've thrown a Grace twice, and here's
world?
no. Hear me out.
Get with the program.
I know,
Josiah.
right?
What?
So first of all, we had those.
This was not the list.
No,
for
well,
Josiah.
I mean, the first two are the ones that I threw. You know, it's
That's
these
true.
later three
That's true.
that I haven't had a lot of experience. But it's a very specific story. So it was Kristen won the championship, and they released those Wolves Graces, and they were all the rage right when they came
so
out.
cool.
And I didn't want to throw it because I liked it. I was like, this is a super cool disc. Let's not throw it.
Yep.
And then I brought it. I drove to like Minnesota, and we stopped at Pickard Park in Iowa and played that course. And I threw the Grace, and I said, this is the greatest disc I've ever thrown in my entire life. It was phenomenal. And then on the next hole, I threw it, and I lost it. So that is
there you go.
I was like, this is and I just haven't been able to get one since. And I was always like, I need this disc. It is exactly when they say it is a beat up Wraith right out of the box. That is what it felt like. I threw two throws, and both.
That's genuinely.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
it was like I threw one throw, and it just flipped up and drove straight for like 340 feet. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I had to do it again on the next hole. And then, yeah. So we're not going to talk about that one. But
we won't talk about that.
For the record, it just went into some woods. And I looked for like 35 minutes. And I just could not find it in the woods. So I don't know where it went. But Bears, the Wolves took
story.
it.
I have a similar story. I think it'll come out in the form of a YouTube short. I was in Hawaii and got a really cool Wraith. And it's gone now. So that might be coming out soon. But those are 5 alternatives to the Wraith. Again, let us know what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.
Stay swanky.
Stay swanky.